Welcome, everyone, to another expert-led large group supervision session here at Resilient Mind Psychotherapy. Our guest today is Raja Selvam, a clinical psychologist and the developer of Integral Somatic Psychology, a therapeutic modality that helps clients achieve optimal mental health through the full embodiment of their emotions. His work is informed by early somatic psychotherapy systems such as Reichian therapy and bioenergetic analysis, and newer somatic approaches, including biodynamic analysis and somatic experiencing, as well as bodywork modalities such as postural integration and biodynamic Cranio-sacral therapy. It is also inspired by Jungian and archetypal psychologies, Kleinian and intersubjective schools of psychoanalysis, affective neuroscience, quantum physics, yoga, Polarity Therapy, and Advaita Vedanta. Dr. Selvam serves as a senior trainer with Dr. Peter Levine's Somatic Experiencing International and has taught for over 25 years in more than 20 countries worldwide. He's also the author of The Practice of Embodying Emotions, a guide for improving cognitive, emotional, and behavioral outcomes, which is a comprehensive and highly practical book for understanding and working skillfully with emotions. Dr. Raja, welcome.
Thank you, Artem, for this opportunity. How many of you are trained in SC or somatic experiencing? Just put your hands up if you are. No one? Okay. Now, it so happens that I'm beginning my 30th year as a trainer in somatic experiencing or SC professional training programs. It is... I've seen it grow. It is now the number one somatic modality used by trauma therapists who work with the body. Not all trauma therapists who work with the body. In the subpopulation of trauma therapists who work with the body, SC or somatic experience is number one. We are very proud of that because I've been with it right from the beginning. Yeah? And it also happens that it's also the number one body psychotherapy modality used by most therapists in the world. Whoever, among people who work with the body, it's the number one modality. So please give it a good look. Give it a good look. And it's in 60 countries and spreading fast. So I'm proud to be part of that movement. In particular because of the method and specific legacy of it. But more importantly, it shows how much the field of psychology has moved in the direction of greater embodiment. Yeah. Now, why is the body important? Yeah. Now, we didn't know that, when I started to train in body psychotherapy approaches in the early 90s, there wasn't as much scientific evidence that the body matters. Yeah. And including the body makes a great deal in your outcomes and treatment times. We knew the practitioners of different body psychotherapy modalities, such as Reichian therapy, bioenergetic analysis, and so on. We knew that including the body actually accelerated the clinical process, outcomes and treatment times. We knew that, but we were still an exclusive club, or rather a fringe group in the larger field of psychology that was quite skeptical of the body. I think it's because they didn't know how to bring the body in. And the ways the body psychotherapists at the time were bringing the body in seemed a bit esoteric, with exercises and so on, without a clear scientific bridge to the importance of the body in psychotherapy. Now, that is no longer the case. In the 1990s, in the mid-90s, a psychiatrist named Bessel van der Kolk, he wrote a series of articles based on one study that showed that in the brains of vets with PTSD compared to the vets without PTSD, and the simple scans were becoming affordable at the time. He found the somatosensory cortices, the centers in the brain that process body information, were not functioning well. So from that, he drew the conclusion that it's important to work with the body in order to what? In order to make the regions that process body information more functional, so that the input from those areas could reach the higher brain areas. He actually found, disturbance in the link between the centers that receive body information and the higher brain areas that integrated all the information. So he went around looking for body psychotherapy approaches. That's when we ran into them. I remember going to Israel in 1998 with Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine for a conference on trauma. We were at the beginning. And then it caught on. Trauma became a paradigm, right? At some point, psychology goes through paradigm shifts. No? One diagnosis becomes the fad, the diagnosis du jour. I mean, we saw this sexual abuse in the 80s and ADD, ADHD in the 90s and so on, correct? And now, or multiple personality disorder in the 60s, the early 70s. Now, trauma caught on. So trauma-informed care became very important. And at that time, boom, we got the information that in order to work effectively with trauma, the body is important. Yeah. And somatic experiencing came into the field around that time. Yeah. So we work with the body through not a complicated technique, but the simple technique of tracking body sensations that people can easily incorporate into their therapeutic intervention without having to bend backwards to, literally to get the body involved. That's what there's an exercise in body in a bioenergetic analysis that does that. In order to break the defense in the diaphragm to access emotions, people are put on a bench, and then they actually literally had to do that to break the defense there to come into the emotions and so on. So when I say they didn't have to bend backwards, they just needed to do what? Interoception of body sensations, which now has spread like weed. Everybody, most people, at least in most therapies, at least have an inkling that they should include at least this in order to make the process embodied, right? But it's limited, and we'll see why that is the case. We need more tools than that, and we'll see why that is in a moment. So, but in the last 25 years, what we have found, there's a ton of research, and I write about it, the practice of embodying emotions, method for improving cognitive, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. In all therapies is something in brackets we had to cut because we needed to have a shorter subtitle. We there in the middle section in the theory, I write about all these findings. Why the body is important? Yeah, the research on that. It turns out in the stream of research, which you could classify under a broad term, the science of embodied cognition, emotion, and behavior. It's clear now that these aspects we work with, therapists work with cognition, emotion, behavior, right? That's what we work on. In order to have good outcomes with these, we need to know what is the physiology of these experiences. And the physiology of these experiences is not just the brain, as we've talked, right? But also the body. That's fine. It's a little bit of a stretch to say cognition depends on the body, but there's a ton of research on embodied and embedded cognition. There's no doubt. But the environment, how does one factor the environment into it? Yeah, this is the science of embodied and embedded cognition, emotion, behavior. So that's an established fact. What it says is that not only for working with trauma, but for any experience, including positive experiences that you cannot control, you cannot regulate. If a modality, it doesn't matter what modality it is, cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy, emotional therapy, if the body is also involved in some way, we're not specifying how it could be involved, and the environment is also not involved, then the outcomes of that therapy, be it cognitive, behavioral, or emotional therapy, will be less than optimal. That we can say with certainty now. Yeah? And I write about that. And then we go one step further. You would ask, then why? I mean, this is something that you can easily verify by making sure that you have a regular exercise schedule, right? Right? And that you have a wide social network of meaningful relationships. Your process now involves the body, right, in some way, and you have the social connectivity, which actually connects your body to the bodies of others. And we know that these things really matter, correct? They improve your emotional, cognitive, and behavioral health as well as physical health, right? But is there something that we can do more than that? We can, and let us see what it is. Now we were taught in the 70s and the 80s in succession, 60s, that it's the behavior of the three experiences. It's behavior that's important. Behaviorism. Change behavior, change cognition and emotion. Is that truth? Yes, of course. But then is it limited? Yes. Now, that's why people moved on to cognitivism. They said that change meaning, and then what? You change emotion and behavior. Cognitivism. Now, that still rules the day, by the way, because it is true that cognitive work does change emotional and behavioral experiences for the better, right? But does it always work? No, it does not. Why is that? Now, in the last 25 years, a new era, a paradigm is emerging, which is called affectivism. It's based on a ton of research that shows that of the three experiences, you cannot really separate one from the other. In fact, if you take emotion, there is a meaning there. If I like you, there's a meaning there, right? Liking is an emotion. And there's going to be a behavior. If I like you, my behavioral impulse will be to move toward you, not away from you. Correct? So it's integrated. And this new science of affectivism shows that the three you cannot separate the three. But more importantly, it is emotion that determines cognition and behavior in every moment. It's true that given that if you change cognition and behavior, you can change emotion. But then again, it's resulting emotion that determines the next cognition and behavior. We know this. We cannot, when we are in a negative space, we cannot get out of negative meanings and negative behaviors or inability to do things we would like to do. As whereas we are in the positive states of mind, what happens? You just say dependence. We have positive associations, memories. These are all cognitions in the broad sense of the word cognition. But also our behavior is better. We are able to do things we couldn't do, or we're able to stop doing things that we do not want to do. Right? We've known this, but now it's being established at the neurological level. This very fact. So emotion is primary, and so going away from the idea that emotion is irrational, it needs to be controlled through behavior and cognition that people still suffer from, especially in cognitive circles, we've gone to the idea that emotion is important information. It has in it behavioral and cognitive information. So any therapy that does not also include emotion in its analysis is going to be suboptimal. Yeah. Now you would say, well, if that is true, Why do I need the body? The body is important because we have already established that you have to include the body and the environment for emotional, behavioral, and cognitive, outcomes to change for the better, right? But is there a direct relationship between the emotion and the body? Yeah. This is where the science of embodied emotions comes in, and my work actually comes in. And I started to work with emotion in the body well before all this information came together. Thank God I had all that information when I started to write the book during the pandemic, the first book on Integral Somatic Psychology, or ISP, my approach. And what this science, this stream of research shows is that for the brain to process a situation well, in all its aspects, cognitively, behaviorally, emotionally, the emotion needs to be as present as possible in as many places in the body. Yeah, that's why emotion, the presence of emotion in the body is important. Whether it's conscious or not, it doesn't matter, right? But it cannot be blocked. So there are a series of experiments, and I'll tell you one. So here is a very specific, concrete experiment done in 2007, at least reported in 2007 at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. What they did was they did an experiment where they blocked one group from having emotional experiences in the face. You know how they did that? They just gave them a pen. Here's my pen. And said, I don't know where it is. They said, here's a pen. And what you do when you see this emotionally stimulating clip or story, you bite on the pen. What does that do? That actually fixates the facial muscles, which are a very important part of emotional physiology. The hypothesis is that if we do that, as opposed to the control group that doesn't do it, you will find significant differences in not only in emotional processing, but also what? Cognitive and behavioral processing. That's exactly what they found. Not only during the experiment, because they were all wired with electrodes, the brains were wired with electrodes, overall activity was down. And specific centers were down, cognition, emotions, but yeah. And then a week later, after the experiment, a week later, it actually worsened in recall tasks. And they could see physiologically the effects, huge differences between the two groups. So when a person does not allow the emotional experience to be in the body, at least they block it, consciously, unconsciously, then what happens? It is hard work to process it immediately after the event. And as time goes by, it's even worse. Yeah. And then there are other experiments that show what? That the similar thing happens if you block other parts of the body from being involved in the emotional experience. So that's a core finding that integral somatic psychology hangs on. And what do? We say, well, let's find that in order to improve outcomes and shorten treatment times, in order to get the brain to optimally process a situation, let's say a situation of loss and separation with loneliness as a symptom, I'm going to talk to you about a specific case a little later. We need to do what? We need to consciously get the client to consciously experience what? The emotion in as many places in the body as possible. How many places for how long is an empirical question, depending on the client's current situation. Yeah. Why do we do that? Because how else would we know whether it's blocked or not? We don't have a scanner that says emotion is present in part of the body. Only when people say they don't what? They've experienced it, we can be certain that it's not blocked. So the practice of embodying emotions, the core clinical strategy in ISP is what? You take a situation, right? Let's say I'm going to talk about a situation of loss and separation. Yeah. A current, and I'll talk about the case. I might show you clips from it. The current situation is that the woman with 3 children with a partner has decided to go her separate way. And the partner and she are living in the same house. But she's suffering from a great deal of grief and loneliness, unbearable. So that's the presenting grief and loneliness and emptiness and despair. These are the emotions that she cannot tolerate. That's the presenting symptoms. That's the situation, right? And it so happens we could go from that situation to the emotion, step 2. Step 1 is situation, step 2, emotion, and support them to have the emotions, provide them enough sympathy and empathy to have emotions, because people will not have emotions unless you provide what? Support, empathic and sympathetic support to the extent to which the client needs it. Different clients need different levels of support depending on the history, right? And educate them about the importance of emotions, validate why those emotions are important, or even lead them to the emotions you think, from your experience, people experience in such situations, if necessary. So that's the work with emotion, the second step. And then, in this case, what happened, the situation was this, but I could see from the intake that the primary trauma of her life, at least in later life, is what? That corresponds, is analogous to this current trauma of separation and loss, is the loss she experienced when she fell in love at the age of 17. First love. And she couldn't believe it that someone older, he was 21 in college, would actually have her as a girlfriend, right? She was on the top of the world. And the boyfriend, unfortunately, died in a fire accident while he was asleep in a student housing, which happened to be on top of a restaurant. It burned down at night, and the whole building burned, and he died in his sleep. Yeah, and that was traumatic. Now, along with it is the mother's refusal to acknowledge it as a loss and being angry with her for grieving. So, and then I realized the reason why she couldn't process it through is what? She didn't have the support. And it turns out that's a history of lack of support, yeah, which she identified, interestingly, as what? More traumatic. She says that in the demo than the actual loss. How can that be? This is like some people saying, the most important trauma of my open heart surgery is the nurse being rude to me after this surgery. It is not. Correct? So people make, and very often, people, therapists themselves will guide them there. Yeah, not understanding that open heart surgery is bigger trauma than nurse being rude to them, right? But all the activation gets loaded onto that. So all the experience of the loss of the boyfriend, got loaded onto the mother not being supportive. Yeah. And so I knew that I had to work with what? The hurt of it, the earlier incident. So I chose that situation and I provided the necessary support. And then we tracked the emotion at the level of the body, emotion in the body, not sensations. This is very important. It's because body psychotherapy approaches now consistently make one singular mistake. The mistake is this. The definition is what? Of emotion in the body is sensation and the bunch of sensations in the body at the same time. This is dead wrong. I'll give you an example. You all know love, right? You've been in love, right? Correct? It's emotion, right? Clearly, you know it when you feel it. It is not the racing heart. It is not, the pleasure, you know, in your genitals or heart. It is not relaxation. It's not those things. They have to do with it, but it's beyond that. You know, Anthony Damasio clearly states that in his book, The Feeling of What Happens, that emotion is a higher order body map. For example, if I were to lose my job, I would feel bad, right? If you run into me and say, "How do you feel with the job loss?" You wouldn't say, "My heart hurts. My energy is lacking in my body." All of that is true. At the level of sensation, discrete sensations, I feel weak, right? I feel so tight in my neck. All of those sensations true, but you will abstract from all these sensations the feeling of what? Not good. That's what you would say. So that is another, body psychotherapy systems, including SC-MAKE, which I'm trying to correct, when I teach a course called Improving the Practice of SC for the Somatic Experience Institute. That's one of the things I say. You have to work with emotion in order to work with complex trauma, or you have to work with emotion, because emotion is the basic primary experience. And the experience of emotion in the body is what? Very important for the brain to process any experience, whether it's traumatic experience or ordinary garden variety difficult experience, right? In order to do that, you have to train your brain to what? Track meaningful experiences of emotion in the body. Yeah, that's one correction I make, and that's very hard for some people, who are used to tracking body sensations. What tracking body sensations when you have emotions in the body or the brain is that it just regulates the body to a neutral state. It neuters the emotion. That is not necessarily making good use of the information contained in the integral experience of emotion. Yeah. So I have to teach people that. Therapists that. They make the adjustment. Then this woman also, I had to have her track the hurt. Yeah, the hurt of losing what? The boyfriend. That's more important. You cannot say that your mother, of course, your mother denying experience is painful, right? Yeah, true. But what is more painful is that you lost the love of your life. Yeah. And you need to feel that experience, hurt, and expand it in the body. That's the practice of embodying emotion, so that the brain can now, with enough support from me that you do not have from your mother, so that you could actually what? Process it through. Yeah, to some extent. And you have to repeat that to the extent to which it needs to be repeated. So it's in that spirit we worked with her hurt. The hurt, then as she was able to, hurt is the most difficult emotion. Behind every unbearable, unpleasant emotion, there is hurt. Otherwise, it wouldn't be unpleasant, by the way. So whether it's grief or whether it's sadness, it hurts like that. And that you have to treat it as an independent emotion and expand it to the body. And I call it sensory motor emotion, feeling bad. And then we were able to expand it in the body. And in order to do that, how do you do that? You can't just say, what is the word, magic word? Poof, let it spread throughout the body. Yeah, it doesn't work. You know why? It can work, but what therapists don't know, and especially in the mainstream, is a significant role played by defenses in the body against emotion, going back to your womb. Instinctual defenses. There are 7 types of defenses, categories of defenses. I write that in my book, write about them in my book. But you know what? You don't need to know each one of them. Constriction is one. Flaccidity is another. Arousal, low arousal is one. High arousal is another. Even dysregulation is one. But you don't have to know any of those things, right? Because you keep focused on emotion, and then you use techniques, right, to undo the defenses in the body so that A, you can access the emotion, right? B, support that emotion from becoming what? Too much. Expand the emotion in the body consciously so that what? The brain has a better chance of um, processing it through and make it tolerable in the body, to regulate it in the body, right? And then to bring them out. Yeah. When things get too much, techniques that are in the background that don't compete for your attention, that tracking the body sensation requires. So I can just be with bad feeling and expand it in the body as a bad feeling. And in order to do that, I don't have to track body sensation. I'm just tracking the emotion. And then I can do techniques. There are any number of techniques. And we use not only physical body techniques, because I'm trained in Eastern psychology. I also know subtle body techniques. I also know collective body techniques. And they're simple to use. They're not, woo-woo. You can actually, they're easy to learn. Self-touch, somatic touch positions, and you can do that and what? Access the emotion, undo the defenses to access the emotion, regulate the emotions, expand the emotions, make them more tolerable, be with them longer so that the brain can process better. And then what? If things become too difficult, use them to keep it regulated. And then if you want to bring them out, you can bring them out. You can have the confidence of working with the body. Whereas if you just had the weak technique of tracking sensations, then what can happen is that you open it up and then client gets overwhelmed, you don't know what to do. Right, then you start to be very careful. Yeah, that is not a good place to be in. Your clients also start to lose confidence in you. Because when you work with the body, things can come up quickly. And if you don't know how to manage it, then clients say, I don't want to go to the body because you got me in there and I go home, I'm suffering. Whereas here, this way, you suffer with them, but you regulate them. The worst suffering they do is in therapy. I remember Robert Stolarov, the intersubjective psychoanalyst I trained with, he said, you have to do the hardest work in the session so that people don't have to suffer outside. And then you give them tools, the same tools, so that for them to manage themselves and to what? Regulate themselves. So expansion regulation tools, we have any number of them with which we can confidently access and regulate emotions most of the time. No technique works for everybody. And no technique works for the same person at all times. That's why you need to have what? Variety of techniques. And that is what we focus on teaching also. And then the final step is integration. What is integration? We know that when the body creates more capacity for an emotion, the body doesn't have to shut down. It opens up and remains open, which means that breathing is better, blood flow is better on the physical level, but also the subtle body can embody itself in the gross body, and the collective body can also come in with archetypal resources on a physiological level, not have to imagine shamanically some archetypal image to work with the collective. You can actually work with the collective through techniques that connect the individual body, physical and subtle, to the collective bodies. So then we help the client notice this phase of integration, which is very important. Not many people sit with it. You sit with them, and then it actually more and more connection happens between different levels of the psyche, and that's where the most healing happens. But it can also be used to bring the client out before they go out the door. Yeah, again, using the same expansion regulation techniques. It's just a different intention, same technique. For example, forehead, the prefrontal cortex, and brainstem, 3 fingers on the bottom of the skull, and 2 fingers on the neck. If you try that, it regulates the brain. Regulates the brain, and what? It regulates the body through it. So if your client is overwhelmed, doesn't matter what therapy you're doing, you do that. And then the first thing you need to do is to have them track the obvious things most people can notice, which you can theoretically expect in most clients. What is it? Breathing will improve, right? Autonomic nervous system, brainstem connection, breathing will improve. Blood circulation will improve. Yeah. Muscles will get less tense. Organ areas will get less tense. Or if they were shut down, areas of the body get more energized. If they're highly agitated, it starts to get calmer. Energy will move down. They'll have a more balance between the top and the bottom. They'll get calmer. This you can ask them to check for. Otherwise, the client's mind will go wherever it goes. This is one of the reasons that Japanese American acupuncturists of mine will say, I prefer that my clients go to sleep, especially therapists. I come in, I needle them, and then they're doing their own process, which detracts from what the needles can do, right? So we are not very good with working with our awareness, right? And so you can guide them. So it's not an open-ended process where you say, what do you feel next? That is okay. There's a therapy like that, and that's okay. That has different outcomes, and people feel better. They heal faster because the body is involved in one way. But when you know the body, technique, and the effects of the technique, you can guide the awareness to those effects, which you can theoretically predict, and reinforce the healing and the technique's effectiveness. Yeah. So this is what we did with the woman. We worked with hurt, and in the demo, if I have the time to show the demo, I actually did a session recently called Shadowing Dr. Selvam. I took this demonstration and I actually unpacked it in terms of what? This process, the practice of embodying emotions. And we used the brain technique. Also, we used what is called, we called 2 subtle body techniques. The heart center element of air that you can distribute in the body by touching 2 places on the body at the same time. There are 3 places, so 3 combinations. Also, ether element with its own ability to regulate the whole system when even the touch of the brain doesn't do it. It's from a higher place. And so we do that, and we got to a hurt. Where? In the gross body. This is where we have come to experience and transform the subtle body, or what is sometimes called the soul. So we're only working with the subtle body in order to facilitate that in the gross body. And the physical body, that's a term used in the East. And then the hurt, the grief, we see how in the demo, I mean, in the demonstration, I see how by connecting with the, doing the air element technique, ether element technique, and the brain technique, distributing the hurt and the grief throughout the body, and then accessing that deep hurt that she had, and to process the hurt that came from the loss when she was 17 years old. And it ends with her saying, I don't feel lonely anymore. Yeah. And, that happens in the session. That doesn't mean that she could have actually said that in order to impress herself or me, it could be just transference cure, but it happened in November, and I got in touch with her in February, just before this event. And she came out and said, you know what? I don't feel lonely. Not only that, my existential fear is gone. I don't know what she meant by that. I'm still having considerable stress around financial issues now that we're separate. But I can tolerate this experience and that still not feel lonely. Yeah, that means what? her heart is still open. And she again said, that's because I was able to hold her and support her emotions like my mother did. That is true. That's only half the story. But there's no way we would have been able to what? Access the emotion, undo the defenses, because therapists are good at some emotional support, but that doesn't do it, right? It remains brain oriented. You need to also work with the body, whether you're working with the body at the physical level or at the subtle level in order to embody it. And so I was really impressed by what she was able to do with it, and then therefore I presented this case, the demonstration of it, and explained the technique while explaining the process of embodying emotion. So I would be glad to send Artem a link to the video, of that particular demo. But I also did 2 other demos, in the Shadowing Dr. Selvam series, and demos from which significant changes took place just from one session. Yeah, and so it doesn't mean that I'm great. It just means that if you have tools of expansion regulation, you can bring enough empathy and sympathy, and you understand that the presence of emotion in the body is very important for the brain's ability to process a situation through. Everybody can do it. And that's what, clients, including these students who went through the process themselves, are reporting back. Once you go through something like that and see its effectiveness, then of course they are eager to apply it to their clients, and they write back to me. And that's when the system has really matured. It's when your students are able to have the same outcomes, even sometimes better outcomes than then the method has really arrived. Yeah. So I will actually make it available. I'm just looking at the time because Artem wanted me to do the following: leave enough questions, time for Q&A, and I would like to do that. But he also said, why don't you give everybody a certain experience of what that might look like? Yeah, shall we do that for about 15 minutes and then try it on for size and then go to Q&A? Yeah, is that okay? And so let's start with I sent you an article and called the 7-step protocol in ISP. And this protocol is especially important when people have high degree of physiological dysregulation, as in PTSD. And what? Very low affect tolerance, or a combination. What you find in what? What you find in complex traumas, developmental traumas, psychosomatic or psychophysiological symptoms, right? We know that, right? When people have psychophysiological symptoms, that's what happens. And the first demo, I'm going to send you links to all 3 events. No, I'll send it to Artem, he'll pass it on to you. She had severe psychophysiological symptoms, and she could no longer sense her arms, right? And she had a loss. She had a series of losses. Someone who was beaten so badly by an ex-husband. And when she started to lose her cats, her best friend, all in the course of a month in August of last year, or the year before, I forget, then she started to develop what? She started to have symptoms from the beating that led to neurological symptoms that she was told she couldn't recover from. She did, actually. She went to Pakistan and found a homeopath who administered spider venom, she thinks, to get her out of this severe neurological condition that 3 neurologists said were going to lead to what? Increasing dysfunction. Yeah. But she started to experience those symptoms. That's what happens when you have increasing levels of physiological stress, no? And her affect capacity was low. And then she had all these things happen. And we worked with that grief to expand it in the body. The physiological symptoms disappeared. And then she was actually able to go and sit by her best friend's grave and not cry, because she just cried. That's how she discharged the energy and felt spent after that. Yeah. So that'll be the first demo that you will get. Again, please, I'll send you all three. I'll be happy to, because it's available on private YouTube channel that you can only access with your a link to it, and not without a password. So we will send that to you, so you can see. You might learn something from it, but you will definitely know what the practice of embodying emotion looks like in sessions that were highly effective. And the techniques, whether they were using gross body techniques or collective techniques or subtle body techniques, that they were very concrete self-touch positions that remained in the background, that did not require the clients becoming familiar with their body sensations, but only emotions. Yeah. So here, this protocol, which is going to be the research protocol for ISP, you can work with low affect tolerance clients or highly physiologically dysregulated clients, and more often in combination. That's traumatic experience, especially complex trauma, developmental trauma, psychophysiological symptom instances, used to be called psychosomatic. And the way we go about it, you can write it down. And if you would like, I can actually bring up the picture. Shall I do that? It's easier to follow that. Give me permission to share my thing, please. Yeah. Before that, let me bring this up. Okay. I have this. And now we go to share. And what we're going to do, send request. Request has been sent. Okay. Permission has been given. And so what we're going to do now, can you see it? The circle? Yeah. Is it big enough for you to read? No? Let me make it even bigger. Let's see. I want to get rid of this table. So, is it better? Right? So what we're going to do, the first step is to find an emotion to work with. You have to choose a relevant emotion to work with, right? That is based on what? Your clinical judgment, right? It could be that you get up in the morning, you're overwhelmed, you have no idea, and feeling bad, you have no idea what the specific emotion is. Fine, because overwhelm is an emotion. Emotion can be defined as the impact life has on you, or a specific situation has on you. A number of situations have on you. So very often I feel, I'm feeling bad. I don't know why, right? I don't know why. And so feeling bad is what I call a sensory motor emotion. We can just start with that. However, you might think of a situation right now in your life, and then you think about the details of it, aspects of you that affect you the most, right? It could be a dream, right? And so I'm going to think of a situation, and I invite you to think of a situation, not the most traumatic experience you've had in your life, but now, in your life today, there is some situation that you don't feel good about. Yeah, I know a situation right now that I'm dealing with. I'm trying to get across a piece of writing, and the people who are reviewing it have no idea. They don't understand, but they think they have. It's very frustrating. Yeah, and what it does, I'm sure that it also cognitively, I know that it might actually activate in me what? The hurt of not being seen, valued, and so on. This is all cognitively I can do very quickly, right? But it doesn't resolve it. And I don't quite know what to do about it. It affects my sleep. Yeah. So I'm going to imagine the situation and see how I can sense the bad feeling in my body. That's step one. No, I find an emotion. I know the situation. I found the emotion. It's vague feeling of not feeling good about it. That's enough. In fact, as I work with it, I know that it will get more differentiated. I'll have a clearer meaning, right? As the brain processes the situation. So right now, I feel bad in my chest, right? So I'm in step two. I've located where it feels bad. Where else would it feel bad? But the primary physiology of emotion, which is what? The heart lung area, right? Yeah. So I'm feeling that doesn't feel good. So whatever situation you have, you notice it. This is step two. And just expand this experience to more of the chest. That's local expansion, one place in the body. So I can do fancy techniques to do that, but I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to keep it simple. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to sense more of my chest. Yeah, so that hurt spreads to more of my chest. It might or might not. The intention. I know that if I increase my awareness to more places in my body, say, the energy will expand and the experience would follow. It might or might not, but that's what I'm doing. Or I might just put a hand here to let it support it expand. I might do two hands here, yeah, and I might even go, expand it into the face and throat. You might also do that, once you found it could be sadness, it could be guilt, it could be shame, or it could just be a bad feeling. So I go, already the situation and what I can do about it in the situation does not seem to be as difficult. I can change, sense the attitude in my brain change. Yeah. But I'm going to continue. And I already know that it sounds like the experiences that of a child. Yeah. I get more embodied cognitive insight, no memory, but from the experience of it. The coughing is because my throat is constricting not to express it because it gets more conscious, right? So I'm just expanding in the chest. And I also notice that my breathing is better in the chest. That's integration. But I don't want to get sidetracked here. I just want to come back to the situation where I'm feeling overwhelmed. Yeah. And then the hurt comes back again. But it's not as bad because it spreads more to throughout my chest. Yeah. So now I have to choose when to go to the step three. Find and expand the same or similar emotion in another part of the body. Why? Because if the person is physiologically unstable, I'm not, has low affect tolerance, I do not most of the time. Therefore, I'm able to stay with it. For somebody who has either, this might be too much. They might fall apart and dissociate. In which case, I can always go here or to the subtle body technique to regulate it. But right now, I'm okay. So I'm going to assume that I suffer with the limitation. So I'm going to look for this experience in another part of the body. Because an emotional experience is a global experience. The evidence for it, theoretical and experiential, I write about in the book. Candace Pert, who wrote the book Molecules of Emotion, she's a molecular scientist, said emotional experiences expand in the body rapidly, involving the whole body. The more difficult it is, the more it spreads out. The whole organism handles it. And so I thought when I read that, if I could distribute it throughout the body, then it would be less difficult in any part of the body. And that's exactly what happened. And so I'm going to put my hand on my belly now, or on the diaphragm. Either way, I can try the diaphragm, because it's often a barrier to the energy and emotion going into the belly, and I start to feel the discomfort in the belly right away. I'm expanding the hurt from where? My belly now. So in step 3, I'm expanding it in my in the belly, and I'm increasingly convinced that my reaction in the situation is regressive. Yeah, it's an archaic transference that disempowers me and makes it hard for me to relate to these folks who are well-intended in what they're doing. They think they're doing a good job. It's just that they're limited in the subject matter and their assumptions about things, which I can easily point out rationally. That behavior I can get into without despairing. The possibility. Yeah, I can feel it. So what earlier in the day I thought of explaining it became too much, because I was met with despair internally, but now I'm not. I can see that they're well-meaning. I just need to do it. They're not doing it intentionally. They just limited, and I can rationally point it out. So, but let me continue with the belly. I can even go to my belly and put both hands on my belly to feel it more, to expand it there. That's the that your witness to my process also helps, right? Yeah, like in a 12-step meeting, you're all muted. You can't say anything, so which I interpret as acceptance, And it's in the belly. It's in the belly. Yeah. The child will feel a bad feeling throughout the body very quickly. And regressive emotions are better worked with through what? Vocalizations that are non-verbal. The moment you try to put words to it, you pass through the language barrier, language repression barrier. That's how Freud termed it. Then you lose contact with the primary experience of emotion in the body. Two places, right? The chest and the belly, and which is the core physiology of trauma. The core physiology of trauma and emotion is where? The autonomic nervous system areas of the viscera. So that's where I'm feeling it, yeah? So I have to now think of a client for whom this might be too much. If it's too much, then I can always go to what? Brain or to subtle body elements to regulate, right? Or even lower it into the legs, And that's what I had to do with that woman who had a loss at the age of 17. I had to bring the energy down into the legs so that the grief could go into the legs, so that the chest, the grief in the chest was more tolerable. We're expanding the energy. So I'm going to step 4. In step 4, I'm going to not focus so much on supporting the emotion or the situation, which will keep evoking the emotion. I'm just going to notice the improvement in my body and energy. And one place, another place, and in the overall body. To have a different, to to make good use of the healing possibility, healing potential from the hard work I did in steps 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. So clients don't know what to sense when you ask them in the abstract. What do you sense now? They don't know. You'll have to tell them. Don't assume that clients know what to track in their bodies, right? Most people don't. And if you let them track, they're going to track what? Negative states, where things are not improved. So you can say, is your breathing better? My breathing is better in the chest, clearly. Even are your muscles less tense? I can feel the muscles less tense in my chest, my heart, lung. Or is another part of the body less tense? My legs are less tense. These are the things. Or if I had high energy to begin with, is it more stable? Or if you had low energy, is the body expanding in energy in one place or the other? We're looking for things locally, right? And then is the energy moving down? Is it more balanced? These are things you can predict. If you do the steps 1, 2, and 3 right, in step 4, you can theoretically predict. Yeah. And then, do I feel calmer overall in relation to the situation? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm not in as much anguish or despair or helplessness as I was at the beginning when I contact the hurt from it here. So explain, that is pivoting to integration. Now let's go to step 5. So I'm going to go with what? Breathing feeling better and the tension less in my chest. I'm going to spend some time there to expand that. So I can do the same thing. Now I put my hand in the chest to support what? The expansion of the integration phenomena, which is what? Lessening of tension and improvement in breathing. Yeah. I'm going to stay there a little bit. And I'm not going to stay there for too long with an unstable client, because in the next round, they might very well have a harder time, right? I will just do, it's like when you walk on fire, you have to keep moving, whether you're in the healing part or the trauma part, right? So, or you're walking in the snow with snowshoes, Winter Olympics and all, you have to keep moving. If you stop too long somewhere in Pennsylvania, you're going to sink, right? You have to keep moving. So I'm going to, after having paid attention to the improvement in the chest, I'm going to look for another place where the body feels better, Let me see what the belly feels. Yeah. It doesn't feel as much hurt, but there is more expansion of energy there, less tension there. So I'm going to put my hand there to support it. And I can also do this to support my belly, by the way. The technique, how the technique works depends on the intention. It could be now I just want to support the integration, improvement, the belly. Yeah. I might even say, it feels good. Yeah. That's step 6, right? I've gone to another place. Yeah. Yeah. And I hope that you try it yourself and with your clients, especially clients who have access to emotion. And yet the emotions are not regulated, or it is not leading to change. This is what I call the low-hanging fruit in ISP. So start there. And then you go to global integration. What is that? You get your awareness to hold the whole body. Please note that I'm not talking about the situation to evoke the emotion again. I'm reaping the work that I've done in steps 1, 2, and 3. The whole body, what am I not going to sense? Is the whole body breathing better? Is the whole body less tense? even though some places might still be tense. Is the whole body more stable in terms of energy, or expanded in terms of energy, or balanced in terms of energy? Yeah. Is the whole body calmer? So I could focus on one or the other, but the operative thing is that you're paying attention to the whole body. Yeah. And this is where, when you hold the whole body with the opening you've created by doing the hard work in 1, 2, and 3, the subtle body can come in more. The collective body can come in its wake with its resources. And this is often where most healing takes place, And whether you're aware of it or not, when you do therapy, go to sleep. That's when the connections happen. So we might as well get clients to consciously process and support this process. Yeah. So I'm sensing the whole body. And of course, talking interferes with it, but this is a professional hazard, right? So, and now, in relation to the situation, I have more confidence that I can handle this more successfully than I thought at the beginning of this session, short session. Yeah, I have more power, and I'm sure that I will find a functional way, not rage at them, and that would be counterproductive. Not be afraid to say what I need to say at the same time. I have a more objectivity here because I'm not regressed. Yeah, and so this is what you do. This is the 7-step protocol, and I hope that you try it. You have experienced some change. If not, you'll try it again, see whether you have experience, or try it with your clients, because sometimes we learn the techniques work through others, not through ourselves, because you don't know who has more resources, you or your client. It depends on the client, right? So some of us learn it that way, but and you do it with them. So this is the 7-step protocol, a specific protocol for implementing the 4-step emotional embodiment, the practice of embodying emotions, which you can use to do what? Deeper, faster, and safer work with your clients from the very first session, very often. Why is it safe? You have the techniques to get people in and out and to do deep work. So therefore, it makes it safe, right? And you're not relying their ability to just track their own body sensations in an open-ended way, following them. That would often be a disaster, because you're following the limited brain and its ability that's traumatized, and its limited ability to track relevant phenomena for healing. Yeah. And you can do it with trauma, as you would see in the 3 sessions I'm going to provide you access to. Yeah. And if you can do it with trauma, guess what? You can work with any experience. Yeah. And if you do that, then what? You can improve outcomes and shorten treatment times with any modality you practice. Whether you're a cognitive therapist, a behavioral therapist, emotion-focused therapist, energy therapist, psychoanalyst, body-oriented psychotherapist like somatic experiencing practitioner, bioenergetic practitioner, or body workers who work with emotions, then when you have difficulty with a client, when you run into your modalities limits, take a time out and do what? Find a relevant emotion in the situation and get them to embody it, like the way I've suggested. And you go back to your cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy, psychodynamic psychotherapy, you will find your process much more fluid. Why is that? The body's more open. It's more available. emotions are more in the body. And you can predict from that, no matter what therapy you're doing, you will have better outcomes. Yeah. So therefore, we say the practice of embodying emotions, whether you're working with trauma or not, can, as a complementary modality, improve your outcomes and treatment times, in all modalities. Yeah. And specifically trauma, because trauma is a hot paradigm. And sometimes people don't care. Improvement of, they want to hear the word trauma. So say you can do trauma work deeper and faster, more quickly and safely, with the gamut of resources that are body, somatic techniques, gross body or physical body, subtle body techniques, and collective body techniques, all for the purpose of what? Embodying emotional experience in the body that we most know, the body that goes from the womb to the tomb, which we acquire in every life, right? For different purposes. And you know what the different purposes they find are? There's a research on memories people have of their life between two lives, right? Under hypnosis. What do they find? They do that in order to heal, right? From one life to the next. And they do that in order to what? Grow. The growth is not done for the subtle body, right? When this body dies, to do that, to do reparations, but also to be of service. These are the different objectives that subtle bodies have over many lives. But in each life, they need what? A gross body as a container in which they have to do the work. They can use the knowledge that they have these other bodies and draw their resources, but ultimately you have to do the work where the rubber meets the road. And where the rubber meets the road is in the physical body. That's why often we say it's a body temple, or to make it less religious, it's the alchemical, container for transformation. Yeah. So having said that, I will stop now and open the space for questions. We have about 15 minutes, but I'll be happy to stay longer and answer your questions. Yeah, if you're up to it. Yeah. It's only 9:45 here, but of late I've been sleeping at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, because all my work is in Europe or the US. Then I find myself working this late. So I'm okay. And I love this work. And so I'm happy to answer more and more questions. And if you're interested in the ISP training, there's an online training, North American online training. It's a 12-day training in 3 4-day modules, starting in, I think, at the end of May, June. And there's also in-person training in Chicago that has already started, but you can do the first module on video and do the practice, make a practice. It's included in the price of the tuition, and join us in Chicago in a lovely facility in when is it? In March. It's a little close, but the online is a little farther. We'll send you I'll send you the training information and training information. I'll send you the links along with the links to the videos that I promised you, where I unpack a series of 3 sessions. Yeah. Jeffrey, where are you from?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Selvam, for your presentation. I'm in Brooklyn, New York. I really loved everything you said. It's really fascinating. I got a ton of questions, but I'll just choose this. We work with a lot of insurance companies at this practice. They encourage a lot of evidence-based and classical practices. Is there? Can you describe the evidence basis here for ISP and how it's different from the evidence basis of somatic experiencing?
Yeah. The thing is, as far as the scientific basis is concerned, I can state with, state proudly and factually that the integral somatic psychology approach has more scientific basis that predict its clinical outcomes than any other somatic modality, including somatic experience. It's broader and deeper, right? Now, however, insurance companies look for what? They don't care what the science is. It doesn't matter. All that you have to, they don't need to, they just want what? Controlled studies, where the technique is applied against, in the treatment group, against a control group that will, it could be just that they're talking to them, right? No treatment control group. That's what they're looking for. And how well the study is done. Randomized control, random assignment of therapists and random assignment of clients, therapists. They're basically going on that ultimately, because they're not, the people who are reviewing these things are not body oriented. So it doesn't matter how much science you provide them, they're going to come back to it. So somatic experiencing, even though it's the number one trauma modality among therapists who use the body and number one body psychotherapy modality, the American Psychological Association refused, and the science of it, it's based on the threat response model that shows that if after trauma, people are left in orienting fight, flies, or freeze, and if the physiology is dysregulated that way or get triggered into the state, then it's suboptimal for what? The body, cognition, emotion, behavior. So we regulate the autonomic nervous system down, physiology down to rest, with and show that this improves the processing of different experiences, and that leads to cure. And that is something that we find all the time. But we don't have enough studies, or whatever studies we have, they're picking holes in it, right? It's a higher bar for somatic therapies. You know how it's ironic that what is considered woo-woo, emotion freedom technique or its origin, thought field trauma, thought field therapy, TFT, they're based on a mysterious technique of tapping along the meridians, which is easy to learn. You can learn it in a couple of hours on YouTube. Let's spend more time refining it. They've done tons of studies. You know how many studies they had to provide? Not only control groups, not control groups, but against the cognitive behavioral therapy. And finally, APA had to do what? Approve it in 2014. And you know how much of an uproar there still is among the traditional members of APA? Enormous. But you know what? No study, no approach, technique has what? Now, that doesn't have a scientific basis, right? Not as far as empirical science is concerned based on measurement, but it's just like EMDR. The number of studies, that is what. ISP, we have not started to do that, and we plan to do that in this decade, now that we're so certain of the outcomes. So we will do that. But for the insurance companies, when they ask evidence-based, they're asking for that. Yeah, there's another reason why they would refuse it too, because I also bring in what? Energy psychology methods and show how effective it is. Now, they will say that has no science, but it doesn't matter as long as I have treatment and control groups. It doesn't matter what technique I use. I do this or I do this, it doesn't matter. I have generated enough studies that are valid, scientifically, then they will accept it. We are not there yet. Yeah. That is, but then it's up to you to decide whether you want to wait for that or actually try that in with your clients, in yourself, and see the effectiveness yourself. Body psychotherapy is still in that realm, even though it's getting more popular. There are not enough studies for different somatic modalities, unfortunately, because they've not done enough treatment group, control group outcome studies. And the bar is higher. Usually the APA says 5 studies, but if it's somatic, they'll say 10, 15. Yeah. So I hope
Thank
that
you, Dr.
gives you.
Selvam. That answers the question. Thank you.
You're welcome. A dissatisfying answer, I'm sure, but that is what it is. So,
No, the insurance companies are okay with us doing other kinds of work, actually. They just want at least one evidence-based modality, usually.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
We can do other kinds of work. It's, as long as we can
that's good to
document
know.
it. Yeah.
So you can use it as complementary modality. You cannot get reimbursement based on this modality, but can use it on any number of modalities that have been godfathered, like including psychoanalysis, or cognitive behavioral therapy has a lot of evidence, but not psychoanalysis. It is just grandfathered. So
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Because psychoanalysts started the APA. So what do you? So
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. I just wanted to kind of reflect how much I appreciated your presentation. I got so many questions myself, but I appreciate you being willing to stay on a little longer if there's more questions. I see that there's a question in the chat box, and if you guys have more questions, you could throw them in the chat box. If you want to ask your question, you could raise your hand. I see that Laura's asking. She said, "Thank you so much. How does chronic pain factor in this technique?"
Yeah. So chronic pain can be organic. That's the first line of inquiry, right? Is it organic? Then the appropriate treatment would be medical, right? Now, if you're talking about chronic pain that is psychophysiological, either in whole or in part, yeah, because in part, because in the chronic pain literature, often there is a physiological component, actual component. There's something wrong in the body. The nerve is inflamed or damaged. The pain is there. But the second pain is the psychological pain, the reaction to it. That's an emotional reaction, right? So, but sometimes the whole thing is psychophysiological. I worked with people where the pain is just psychophysiological because the doctors cannot find anything organic, right? So how do you work with it? And very often, chronic pain, is often, if it's psychophysiological, when people have psychophysiological symptoms, in the literature on psychophysiological symptoms, or what you used to call psychosomatic, we changed it because psychosomatic has come to mean what? It's all in your head. No? You change the meaning, you change the pain, which is also true to some extent, right? So what you do, they have low affect tolerance or little familiarity with emotion because of lack of support. That's one. And they've also had trauma, severe trauma growing up, right? And stomachache is a common psychophysiological symptom in children. So what do? You can work with it. And how do you work with it? You can take some situation here in the present and try to access the emotion and try to embody it. It doesn't matter which emotion or some relevant emotion given the current life situation, some situation that's difficult. Or you can go directly, where what you do, you feel the pain, right? And then you start to vocalize it. You notice that it doesn't feel good. Not feeling good brings it into the abstract experience of emotion. And it doesn't feel good. And what's important to know is that the throat phase physiology, for some reason, is able to interpret, make sense of to the emotional experience in a physiological symptom. That is psychophysiological. There you go, nonverbal. And then when you bring it into the face and throat, the brain gets even more connected to it. We know that from research. And then you get to it. I wrote a paper for a bodywork journal, the UK. What do I do with clients who repeatedly come with the same pain, or pain is in another part of the body, and doctors cannot find anything? And I've gotten to know them over time. They have these psychological issues, but they don't want to go anywhere near it. That is typical of people with psychophysiological symptoms. They don't want to do psychological processing. They want a physiological solution. So, and at least you trick them into having an emotional experience before you refer them out. And this is what I suggested, bring it into the face. Imagine somebody with that pain, feeling bad, with their face contorted in pain and vocalizing that pain. Or imagine yourself doing it. Not do it. And then you say, let's do it together. Yeah. And then this is often how I unlock the emotional experience and psychophysiological symptom. And then what do you do? Once I have the emotion, I go in the reverse direction. I expand that emotional experience, not as pain. Now, I have to tell you something. I don't work with expanding pain itself, a migraine. Students don't expand pain. And you know what happens when you tell students not to do something? And especially the oppositional students will actually try it, and they'll come back and say it actually worked. Right? So, but I usually say go for the bad feeling, not the pain itself. Don't try to expand the migraine, but how bad it feels here, and bring it down. And that you can do, right? For example, if you hold, I don't know how to turn this off, but you can hold the hip joint and the ankle joint. It will actually quickly bring the energy down, and the migraine will lessen. And then you might start to feel the bad feeling that is behind the migraine, which might differentiate into what? Into sadness or fear or whatever it is. And that's how we work with psychophysiological symptoms, if it is the case with chronic pain. So the next question.
Yeah, Kristen's asking, when clients shift from internal awareness to the emotional experience back to the narrative of a situation, what do you feel could be an approach to keep them connected to the body and respect the client's readiness? So it's like, people get away from the body, they go back to the story.
Yeah. See, there's nothing wrong in going to cognition, as long as the cognition is helping them. So first you have to check to see whether cognition is helping them. To what? To make better sense of the emotion or the situation, or is it getting away from? That determination you have to make, that you can make on the basis of your experience with your client, right? Let's assume the latter. I think the questioner is asking them, why would they go away from emotion in the body, right? Two reasons. They don't have adequate empathy and sympathy for the emotion from you. I would start there. And then you're not providing them with adequate what? Simple, easy to learn and apply somatic techniques. These are the two places I would go to, right? And it's possible that they've done enough and they've gotten away from it. So you'll have to think about what they've been able to achieve and let it go and not force them back to it. If you have a sense that they've done enough of it, then you come back later in the next session and see whether shifts have happened. Because even if you do a little bit of the process of embodying emotion, there's bound to be what? A greater facilitation of brain processes in relation to the situation. If it is not there, then you repeat. So now, one question people ask is how should the emotion be? How high should the level of emotion be? How much should wide should the expansion be? Deep should the expansion be, right? How long do you need to keep them? That's empirical. I've seen clients who, for example, one client with asthma after a breakup, who didn't connect it to the breakup, a psychotherapist in France. I write about her in the book. And it was just a little bit of emotion, sadness, little in the eye, little bit in the throat, and we didn't think that much happened at the end of the session. And I wished that I picked somebody else because it doesn't look good in the demo, right? Except that when she went home, the dam broke. She was able to deeply cry for a long time about the loss that she had actually rationalized away as, I broke up with him and I processed everything before I broke up with him. Therefore, there was nothing to process except that I have asthma. And then after she did that, crying, the asthma disappeared. She no longer had it. So she came back to me during the next training module and said, this happened. I said, great, great. So you don't know who will benefit from how much of embodying emotion. I learned from that. Yeah. So, of course, the sessions that are more dramatic, are more interesting for the therapist as well as client, or especially the observing therapists. But it really depends on the where the client is, how much capacity they have, and how much over the edge do you need to take them. So threshold.
Yeah, does anybody else have questions? If not, I definitely can throw a question in. I mean, I have a lot, but there's
Please.
yeah, there's something that you speak about in the book, and this is around resonance and clinicians either resonating too much or too little. I've never heard clinicians mention that they're resonating too little. But I often, I would hear that like clinicians take on a lot, and especially early on, we have a lot of young clinicians. So like early on, there can be a lot of like becoming overwhelmed or like taking in too much of the client's emotions. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to, what would be the process of regulating that.
Yeah. The taking on too much is never a supervision question in somatic modalities. Because therapists, for example, somatic experiencing, where people focus on trauma, they're tracking themselves, at least at the level of sensation. And so we'd never have the question, I'm taking on too much, I'm burning out. No, you don't have it. So nobody asks the question, how do I protect myself from the client? But you can do better than that. Now, it's in part cognitive, because most approaches, because they don't work with the body, and they work with a model of what Robert Stoller of the intersubjective psychoanalysis says, of isolated minds and isolated bodies, right? They don't believe that, they believe in this robotic model where you're separate and I'm separate, and the only communication that takes place between us is through what? The five senses and verbal interactions. Whereas there is so much research, if you look for it, that shows that we're constantly exchanging electromagnetic energies. We are constantly exchanging quantum mechanical energies. That's one of the reasons why people went from initial skepticism of whether online therapies will work, because we can also communicate. In fact, I find myself being more resonant through my body in online sessions than in close, with clients in close proximity in the same room, where there's the more of an experience of the short-range electromagnetic exchanges. So the experience is different, but the system does what it does, no? And so we don't understand that, and there's a great deal of fear about countertransference in many approaches. The fear that we would project our experience on the client. So they're told not to use their body experience to track their clients or to regulate their clients. This is such a loss, no? And it's like throwing truth. There is transference, there is countertransference, clearly. But that's dirty water. But you don't want to throw the baby out of the bathwater. That information, and it's amazing in the in ISP trainings. That's a big topic because emotional regulation is what it's happening at that level. In fact, Fonagy, one of the attachment theorists out of the UK, he says this. It's not clear how he implements it. He says a good enough mother regulates a child. How? By being able to sense the child's affect states in her body, in their body. How is that done? A Kleinian psychoanalyst would say it's through projection or projective identification, right? But how is that done? There is science that explains clearly how it is. Like, for example, when I'm at night, sometimes I come, I'm disturbed. My wife is disturbed. She has a disturbed night. When I'm calmer, regulate myself, I can actually see her go deeper and deeper into sleep, breathe deeper. So, or I come back from a session that I've done, euphoric about the outcomes, and having shared in the resonance, the healing energies that came in to, transform us both, my wife would ask this uncomfortable question: whom did you work with? Is your kidney deeply stressed? And of course, I would say, be annoyed by that. I would say, I love you too. And then start to feel what? My kidney dysregulated. Then I would make one more statement, defensive in nature. You must have had a troubled kidney. Now that I'm feeling it. But no, she mirrored it through her resonance. And through that, she brought me there. And then I would humbly go upstairs and do a couple of yoga sessions or whatever it is that I do to regulate myself back from what I picked up in the resonance that I held to facilitate a great session. It's unlike caregivers who can hold the activation of those who they care for, only to, after they done with the job, they fall apart, right? Whereas if they've actually did some routine maintenance, then they don't fall apart. So it's a very important topic in ISP because it's very important. It's so easy to regulate clients when you're also able to share with them. This is the heart of empathy, the ability to sense what they're sensing. Sometimes even before they sense it. What is in the unconscious, you can resonate with them. Again, you can't be sure because, what we see is what? Nowadays, what we see, did the January 6th attack happen or not? Even what we see, we are doubting, right? So no perceptual sense is, infallible. Especially body sensing is even more infallible. It's a kind of, and therefore we have to be humble and not insist that we are sensing the client correctly and get arrogant about it and play psychic, but actually use the information. It can be used very well, so to regulate them. So, and one of the things I've heard from the beginning, even before I understood, its very nature, because I had fortunate enough to have a grandmother and mother who could do that. So I learned that intuitively, without knowing that I had that ability. And people will tell me, I felt so held. I don't know how. I said, I'm not doing anything. In fact, I'm sitting here thinking I'm not doing a good enough job. What else do I need to learn, in order to help this person? Where the person's saying, I felt so held by you. Yeah, that's the inherent interpersonal resonance capacity I developed, especially from my grandmother, I think so.
Beautiful, Raha. Thanks so much thanks so much. I think that's it. I think that's all the questions we have. I mean, I'm sure people have more questions, but I think this is good for today. Really appreciate the presentation and everything. And thank you everybody else for coming on.
if you have any questions, please write to me. You cannot depend on a timely answer, but I will answer it sooner or later. So,
Yeah.
and I will give you my email address when I send the resources I mentioned along with training information. So,
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
And, buy the book, read it, read chapters, read section 1 and section 3. Forget the theory, for now. And then apply it to yourself and your clients. People write to me and say, hey, I've been using it. It's amazing. So what more can I do? And I say, come and learn about subtle body and collective body techniques. Also, even more techniques on the gross body and so on. So it can be useful in itself. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Great book. Highly recommend it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Artem. And thank you. And, this is a very holy work and helping others. My blessings to you and best of luck to you in your personal and professional lives, and especially in the year of 2026. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Artem. I'll be in touch. Yeah. So.